Goke in the southeast of the country. 7 confirmed and suspected cases have been reported, including
imported from other countries like Thailand and Cambodia. This is what they are, the working family, which is sad. Because if those countries did not was not ground zero, how could they be the origin of the two from frozen food? Congratulations, sir, on vaccination. It's going very well. Vaccination, the fastest in the world. And also the polio vaccine is also very high turnout.
Thank you very much, Excellencies, distinguished delegates. Thank you for your patience. Welcome again. Given we are a little behind time getting underway, I'd like to give the floor immediately to the Director General, Dr. Tedros, for his opening remarks. DG, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Tim. Honorable Ministers, Excellencies, dear colleagues and friends, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and thank you for joining us for today's briefing. As you know, The independent expert team to study the origins of the COVID-19 virus has completed its trip to China. This was an international team comprising experts from Australia, Denmark, Germany, Japan, Netherlands, Qatar, the Russian Federation, the United Kingdom, the United States of America, and Vietnam. The team also includes experts from WHO, FAO, and OIE. I want to start by thanking all members of the international team for their work. This has been a very important scientific exercise in very difficult circumstances. In a few moments, you will hear from two members of the international team, Professor Marion Koopmans, Head of the Department of Virus Science at the University of Rotterdam, and Dr. Peter Berenbach, our WHO expert on food safety and zoonosis. The expert team is still working on its final report, and we look forward to receiving those report and a full briefing. Some questions have been raised as to whether some hypotheses have been discarded. I want to clarify that all hypotheses remain open and require further study. Meanwhile, we're continuing to see a decline in cases globally, with a 17% drop compared with last week. This is the fourth week of declining cases. The number of deaths also fell for the second week in a row, with 88,000 new deaths reported last week, a terrible number, but a 10% decline from the previous week. These declines appear to be due to countries implementing public health measures more stringently. But remember, we have been here before. Now is not the time to relax measures or for any of us to let down our guard. Every life that's lost now is all the more tragic as vaccines are now being rolled out. The virus continues to circulate widely and new variants are emerging. This is not an unexpected development, but it gives a new urgency to our global efforts to bring this pandemic under control. Every time the virus mutates, no matter where in the world, it has the potential to blunt the effectiveness of our vaccines, medicines, and tests. Recently, there have been concerns over a study that showed the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine was found to be minimally effective at preventing mild to moderate disease against a new variant of COVID-19. We still do not know if the vaccine continues to prevent severe illness caused by the variant, however. These results are a reminder that we need to do everything we can to reduce circulation of the virus using proven public health measures. At the same time, we have to be ready to adapt vaccines so they remain effective, as we do with flu vaccines, which are updated twice a year. Manufacturers will have to adjust to the evolution of the virus, taking into account the latest variants for future shots, including boosters. The emerging variants underscore why it's so important to scale up manufacturing and roll out vaccines as quickly and as widely as possible, while prioritizing frontline health and care workers and those most at risk. WHO and our partners in the ACT Accelerator have laid the groundwork. We have created a dose-sharing mechanism, set up rapid processes for the emergency use listing, set up indemnification and no-fault compensation mechanisms, and completed readiness assessments in almost all AMC countries. But I see three major threats to the success of the ACT Accelerator and COVAX, which need our urgent attention. First, the financing gap for the ACT Accelerator stands at more than $27 billion for 2021. The longer this gap goes unmet, the harder it becomes to understand why, given this is a tiny fraction of the trillions of dollars that have been mobilized for stimulus packages in G20 countries. Second, we call on all countries to respect COVAX contracts and not compete with them. Some countries continue to sign bilateral deals while other countries have nothing. And third, we need an urgent scale-up in manufacturing to increase the volume of vaccines. That means innovative partnerships including tech transfer, licensing and other mechanisms to address production bottlenecks. Yesterday, I had the pleasure of welcoming the United States of America to the Access to COVID-19 Tools Accelerator. We're glad to have their support and involvement, and we look forward to their partnership in ensuring that all countries enjoy equitable access to vaccines, diagnostics, and therapeutics. Finally, on Sunday, a new case of Ebola was reported near the city of Butembo in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, in the same area where a previous outbreak recently occurred. Yesterday, another case was confirmed. Both sadly have died. Thanks to the enormous capacity built during the last outbreak, provincial health authorities now have significant experience in responding to Ebola and in preventing transmission. Vaccines are being sent to the area, and WHO has deployed a rapid response team to provide support to local and national authorities. More than 200 contacts have been identified. We hope vaccination will begin this week. Excellencies, thank you once again for your continued engagement. We look forward to your comments and questions. I thank you. Tim, back to you.
Thank you very much, DG. Now to our first agenda item, and that is the update on the WHO-convened global study on the origins of SARS-CoV-2. It's my pleasure now to introduce Dr. Peter Ben-Mbarak, who is the lead for the WHO international team. Peter, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you and welcome to this session. I just landed back from Wuhan within the last hour, so sorry for not being in the room or in person, but I'll try to provide you with a proper update. So we concluded the 4 weeks mission in Wuhan under difficult circumstances because the 4 weeks were under quarantine conditions. With everything much more complicated and difficult than otherwise. We concentrated on two goals. Was to understand better what happened in December 2019, and that was one of the key objectives to be able to start looking into the source and origin of the virus. Without a clear better understanding of what happened in December 19, we run the risk of starting search and looking for the origin in the wrong direction. So that was a key objective. The second one was then to start looking and trying to explore different options, different hypotheses into the source and origin of the virus. So we did both things by throughout the 4 weeks we were there with a series initially while in full quarantine for a series of virtual meetings with our counterparts, and then with a series of site visits and physical meetings with our counterparts, but still under restricted movement conditions. So in the key findings in terms of what happened in December 2019 is that there was clear widespread community transmission in Wuhan in December 19, in particular the second half of December 19. The picture for the first half of 19 is more unclear. There was a start cluster transmission in the Wuhan market, and then there was also indication of sporadic cases throughout the city. Whether there was possibly other clusters and more widespread transmission in early December is difficult to say at this point, but clearly for the second part of December that was the case. That was also reflected by the sharp rise of excess mortality in mid and third week of January, consistent with a widespread transmission already at the end of December and early on. We also look for evidence of transmission prior to December 19 in Wuhan and elsewhere in the province and neighboring provinces. And the conclusion is that we couldn't find any sign of large outbreaks of something that could look like COVID-19 in Wuhan or elsewhere in the months before December 19, and that covered October, November, and December 19. This being said, there could potentially have been, and probably was, a number of sporadic cases in Wuhan and potentially elsewhere, but detecting sporadic cases of a disease like COVID that has such a widespread type of symptoms is I would say almost impossible. But there are still avenues that can be explored to try to find earlier cases. So we have identified a series of new studies that will help us try to identify cases prior to December 2019. Together with Chinese experts and based on their analysis and their review of individuals presenting with symptoms that could look like COVID-19 cases, identified through their different surveillance systems, whether it's ILI, fever surveillance systems, flu, etc., did not, according to their analysis, did not yield any individuals who would fit the case. So therefore, we identified also another promising avenue, which will be to look at samples from the Wuhan blood bank, and we could potentially do the same with other blood banks in the province and elsewhere. The Wuhan blood bank has some 200,000 samples covering 2019 and all the way to the end of 2018. And these have been secured. There is otherwise a natural expiration for these samples. They are destroyed after 2 years because they are mainly used for litigation purposes and therefore have an expiry life. There will be difficulty and limitation in how to do that because current regulation do not allow easy testing of these samples for any purpose apart from use for litigation purpose. But everybody felt that was a good avenue and a good project to look at. So the samples have been secured and will be proposed to be included in such a future study. Otherwise, there is still search for other biological material that could potentially be tested or looked at for sign of the presence of the virus, and these will also be looked at in the coming months. In terms of the market, what happened in the market in December 19, the market was showing sporadic cases already the second week of December and the third week of December, and after that it was a much more widespread presence of cases in the market showing a local transmission. This is also backed by comparing the sequences, genetic sequences of the cases, of some of the cases in the market, and showing that these are very much alike and therefore consistent with the theory of cluster spreading over several days and weeks in December in the market. The cases outside the market with no link to these particular markets or no reported link to that markets are typically showing sequences that are slightly different than the ones in the market, with a link with the market, and therefore indicating again possible different circulation and different transmission chain throughout the city. The market was mainly trading in frozen aquatic products, seafood and the like, but also meat products, and a dozen of vendors were also trading frozen products of farmed wild animals. There's still uncertainty about the presence of live farmed wild animals in that market. Officially, this is not allowed. It's an illegal practice if it happened. There are reports from journalists and others who were there around the time the market was closed, which could indicate the presence of live animals, but this remains to be further explored. It is also clear that back in 2014, we have documentation through published literature that there was at that time live animal markets, but live wild animal in the Huanan market, but these were apparently terminated through change of regulations after the H7N9 flu outbreaks a few years ago. So that was the situation on the markets, and then looking into the source, we also looked at data generated from animal studies throughout the country and the province, and there has been a quite large number of animal samples tested, both wild, farmed, and pet animals throughout the country. All of these have not yet any clue on possible animal host harboring the disease or the infection. The only animals in China who have shown any sign of infection have been through one study in Wuhan last spring, looking at the number of cats in the city, and these have shown prior sign of infection early on in 2020. That's the only sign of animal being infected with COVID-19 in China so far, from what we have seen and heard. There was also widespread environmental contamination in the market when it was sampled in January after its closure, consistent with the fact that there was a lot of human circulation and transmission of the virus in the market at that time, so not surprising. And of course, because it was a one-time sampling in January, it cannot be used to indicate anything about the source of this environmental contamination in terms of specific location or linked to specific type of vendors or environmental contaminants or a particular place in the market. We have then looked at different pathways how the virus could be introduced in the human population, and we have illustrated through a graph all the possible pathways, and these include different versions of three options. One is direct introduction in the human population from bat populations. Second one is the same bat population or another animal species introducing the virus into one or several intermediary host animal species, whether domestic or wild, and from there jumping into the human population. And the third one is possible lab accidents of some kind, which would have introduced the virus either directly into the human population or through an animal population again and back to the human population. And there are different variations of these three key pathways. Based on that, we have designed a number of hypotheses that we have assessed for their likelihood in terms of helping us to develop a series of recommendation for new studies and new research projects to advance our knowledge of the source of the virus. So, as Dr. Taylor said, these hypotheses, even if they are assessed for their likelihood, are still open hypotheses. They're still all valid to different degrees. They're just used to help us to better guide and prioritize the studies we feel would be useful to conduct based on our new current knowledge. What I wanted to say, and the recommendation we made then afterwards was precisely to develop a series of new studies to advance our these different hypotheses, because they all raise questions, they all stop at some point in the logical flow of our knowledge and what we can say on these different pathways and different hypotheses. And therefore we have designed studies that will help us advance towards one or several of these hypotheses, or enable us to